Hello, good morning. We'll continue our lesson on biblical exegesis, meaning biblical interpretation or interpretation of biblical text. So we've been looking at in the last class the model of communication. So basically, we are saying that Bible is a form of communication. And Bible is not only just a communication, it is interpersonal communication, as you see on the title. So, what is interpersonal communication rather than some other forms of communication? That's going to be the discussion for this class today. And to be interpersonal, it should involve two or more personal beings. So it should involve two or more personal beings. And personal beings in the Bible, it is divinity, meaning they're God, and also there are angels. And then among the angels, there are good angels and bad angels. And bad angels are called Lucifer and his followers. That's about a third of the whole angels. So these are the bad angels and good angels. Then us human beings. So basically there are three different kinds of personal beings. Godhead, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Then you have all these angels, and then we have human beings. So three different entity or levels of personal beings, and these personal beings communicate. Among the human beings, we do have this interpersonal communication because human beings are considered as personal beings. Okay, so let's continue on this topic. So what makes it interpersonal? First thing is a spirituality. And then second thing is personality, and third element would be relationships. And let's look at the spirituality first. Any personal being, any human being has body, soul, and spirit. And body, considering the body, physical the elements, the plants, animals, they do have this bodily form. Thus, they are considered a live object, living subject. But animals are not considered as a spiritual being because they do not have that spirit. Some animals you may consider they have soul because they think they have mind. Dogs and pigs, and these animals highly intelligent, so they may have some thinking and logical process and memories and decision makings and so on. But they do not have spirit. And only the human beings are made with the spirit, because God has created them and then blew the spirit in through their nose. So that's how we get the spirit, and human beings are spiritual beings. So spirituality is a must to be interpersonal. And there is something called personality. And some of these elements also are in the animals, but it's not in its full sense. Only human beings or angels or God, and they do have cognitive, meaning the intellect, and affirmative, meaning making decisions and desire and will, and they can live according to, or make decisions according to their willingness. So that's affirmative. And then affective side means that they are excuse me. They do have this elements of emotion, feelings, and so affective dimension means the feelings of a person or animal. So these elements compose a human personality. So when you are communicating with another personal being, there's that dynamic, invisible dynamic going on, and that makes that communication interpersonal. And so it naturally comes to the topic of relationship. So it has to be relational to be interpersonal, meaning that they interact with one another. And though there's a non-personal relationship, such as business relationship, and if you do not know each other, and some level of education, for example, this kind of classroom education may be non-personal, though it could be interpersonal. So even the business relationship, it becomes interpersonal rather than non-personal. So interpersonal, to be interpersonal, it involves all three dimensions of cognitive, affective, and affirmative dimension of human character or human personality. So interpersonal relationship, it involves all the personal dimension of who you and who you are. So that's the term interpersonal. So when we say Bible is interpersonal communication, that means it involves the personal dimension of both God and us human beings. It involves that spirituality about our thinking and our spirit. So that becomes very interpersonal. And when the communication is interpersonal, it speaks to your heart, your whole being, rather than just give information. So today, there are a lot of different media, like a television, very common. You have internet, SNS, smartphones, and then movies, radio, there's all these different kinds of media. But most of the communication that going on through this media is not so personal. But the Bible, on the other hand, even though it's just a book, it becomes very personal. Many times it should be personal as you read the Bible. And if you read the Bible and if it doesn't become personal, then it's not speaking to you. So in that case, it's just a book, and you're doing just a reading. Okay. And non-personal communication. These are some examples of non-personal communication, and these non-personal communication have non-personal intent and motive. So, for example, business, the money is the first and primary intention or motive of their relationship, right? And the communication. So when you do the business communication, you don't care about how many children that person has, or what issues he or she has at home, or what he has eaten for this lunch. You don't care about those. You care about the items, how it is made, and how expensive those are, and how many products that you can make and you can order, and if they are able to produce that many products as you demand, and such things. And those things are not so personal. So those are non-personal intent or non-personal motive. And when these are the objects, it becomes non-personal communication. Thus, it's pretty much authoritarian, and it's usually many times it's one-way communication, meaning you speak and then you don't really, for example, television is very one-way, and television just shows what they want to show in the program, and you can turn that channel or you can turn off the channel, and you just get the information or entertainment, and there's no way to respond to what you have heard or what you have seen. Though some smart TVs these days may have a two-way communication, that's limited. So usually the television, radio, these are the one-way communication, and that's non-personal. If the Bible is like a one-way communication, God speaks and that's it. And if that is the case, Bible is not worth to study. It's not worth to interpret, because it wasn't written for you to have responses to what you have just read. But Bible actually, it does demand your response, your reaction, and your questions even. And non-personal communication largely focus on the factual elements of the text. So it is very factual. It doesn't involve emotion. It does not have room for the feelings. So that's a factual, and okay. Thus, it is pretty much informative, meaning it is trying to give information, and that's about it. So most of the classes that we have in the college rooms or college settings, those are very informative, and there's little room for it to become a personal. On the other hand, the sermons that are preached in the church, that should be very personal, interpersonal communication. But sadly, some of the sermons that are preached today in the church are just informative. It gives you information, and that's about it. And the preachers or pastors does not expect a response from the audience. And when that becomes a natural or becomes a routine, then it is sad that that church is spiritually dead. We can say that because being interpersonal, being being spiritual means largely being interpersonal. So when you say a spirituality or being spiritual, that means you're being interpersonal. So only the spiritual matters happens between two or more personal beings. So again, the Bible is a spiritual book. That means it is personal. It deals with interpersonal matters. Again, the being spiritual means it deals with interpersonal matters. It deals with the guilt. It deals with the sin. It deals with the anger. It deals with the feeling of sadness, and it deals with the joy, peace, and happiness. These are all the interpersonal topics. You cannot be happy by yourself. You cannot love someone. You cannot love without having someone to love. So peace is not just being yourself by yourself somewhere in the island where there's no one. So that's not kind of peace that the Bible is talking about. The biblical peace has to have one, two, or more personal beings. And when these personal beings create the dynamic of shalom, in other words, the dynamic of happiness, as a human beings designed to relate to one another. That's a state of God's creation. When that happens, that's shalom. So the Bible is more than informative, and it is very personal. So non-personal communication, it takes less of a so-called interpretation. There's not much topics or subjects that to be interpreted because it's factual. Facts speaks itself by just being this statement. For example, it's 98 degree Fahrenheit today. That means it's 98 degree Fahrenheit today. There's no interpretation to be involved. So this kind of non-personal communication don't really need interpretation. It usually adds knowledge because it is informative when you learn, and that's probably the primary purpose of having the non-personal communication. On the other hand, the interpersonal communication that we are trying to learn, which is the Bible. So when you are doing the exegesis or the interpretation of Bible, you have to remember this Bible is very, very interpersonal. Whole passage, not 100% of passages, but the most of the passages are interpersonal text. And even though some of the texts that we see in the Bible are informative, for example, the laws are very informative, and but the background or the whole book of Bible intends to be interpersonal. So we have to remember that the Bible is very interpersonal communication. So what does it mean to be to have or to be in interpersonal communication? First, it has to touch the personal dimensions. We've just looked at there are three personal dimensions: physical, then emotional, and there's the spiritual. So soul, spirit, and the body. And in the soul side, there's your emotion, your knowledge, and then your decision or desire, willingness. So these are so-called personal dimensions. And the Bible is touching all these elements. It's designed to move your heart, your soul, and your spirit. That's why it takes some interpretation and it becomes personal. So when you read the Bible, it is best when you become personal. You yourself has to be involved, and you put your in the position that as if God is speaking to you today at this very moment, and for you and you only. That's how you perceive the Bible or biblical text as personal message. And again, when it's interpersonal communication, it does have that personal motive and intent. What are the personal motive and intent of the Bible? The Bible wants you to find out and return to God, because God He cannot let you be there without Him, without knowing Him. Because when God created, He wanted to have that a good interpersonal relationship with human beings. Not only just Adam and Eve. He wanted that relationship with every and each one of us. For us human beings, we can only relate in interpersonal way with just a few people. You cannot have this interpersonal relationship with hundreds of people. That's not possible. So all the politics is not so interpersonal. Us human beings are limited in having that capacity of a full interpersonal relationship. Only just handful you can have that interpersonal relationship or quality relationship. But God, being God Himself, being omnipotent, meaning Almighty, He is able to have this interpersonal relationship with every single person He has created. So that's who He is. If He is not who He is, then there's no need or no justification for us to relate to God or have that relationship with God. So this Bible is written with a personal motive from God. So we can come back from being lost. So the Bible says we are lost. Just like a sheep who has gone astray, gone by himself from the herd. And see, that's the picture in the Bible. So we are like a sheep who are lost, and then the shepherd is looking for the sheep, and that's the same thing the intention, the biblical intention, God wants to find these lost souls, lost people, and that's the desire. So when we do the interpretation of Bible, what would be the focus? Our message, how God desires to seek and find out, find the lost souls, and then how He wants to bring us to the state, the original state of His creation, how we are created. We are created equal, but not the same. Okay, I'll repeat. We are created equal, but not the same. And that's how God created us. And each and every of us has a different characters, different personality, and different abilities. But God can make us as a full-blown human being, as He has created each of us differently. And that's God's intent. And that is fully contained in the Bible. So as you read the Bible, please remember, and as you interpret the Bible, this is interpersonal material, not just informative book. So it involves emotions and feelings. And it is natural for you to feel loved, and sometimes sad, sometimes very repentable. And that these things happen as you read the Bible. And if that happens, it means you are doing okay. I mean, it should move your hearts. Okay? Thus, because it is interpersonal, it takes some interpretation. So it's more interpretive than some other books. Some non-personal material doesn't take that much interpretation, but the Bible being very personal message. When it's personal, you receive it. You may receive it differently than some other people. So it takes personal interpretation. And it affects the relationship, which means you can either come closer to God as you read the Bible, or you can even go against God as you read the Bible. See, yeah, you may understand that, I mean, you can come closer to God as you read the Bible, because it talks about who God is and how God feels about you and all these things. But what about as you read, you go against God? Some people study Bible and they go further against God, because there is that anger against God, that there is that evil intention in people, and those, they may harden their heart, just like in the story of Exodus. God made the Pharaoh's heart. The Pharaoh is the Egyptian king, right? Egyptian king's heart hardened because God made it so. So that means God forced him to. That does not mean that God forced him to the Pharaoh to have the hardened heart, but it means God in the interaction, God has caused Pharaoh to anger and go against God, and so it's mutual, 100% God's responsibility, and it's 100% Pharaoh's responsibility. This rule of 100% to 100%, This is the interpersonal math, as I call. When something is interpersonal, there is like not like a 50-50% or 70-30% of responsibility. It's 100% of you and 100% of someone else. Whether it's a marriage, whether it's the dating relationship, whether it's a brother and sister thing, or whether it's a parents to the children thing, anything, whether it's a friend to friend. I mean, when it's interpersonal relationship, you are 100% responsible as much as the other party is 100% responsible, which becomes 100% result. So there's no like a 200% by adding 100% to 100%. When it's the interpersonal relationship, it's 100% plus 100% becomes 100%. No 70-30% or 50-50%. That does not happen in interpersonal relationship. In the legal matters, yes, they kind of try to quantify 30-70%, thus having 100% together. That's in the legal field, but in the biblical sense, the interpersonal relationship is 100% plus 100%. So anything that happens in the Bible, it's 100%. Even you're being evil, some people blame Satan for you being evil, and you doing sin. No, that's not true. Even though Satan may attempt you and try to make you become evil, you are the one who making that 100% decision. So you're 100% responsible. At the same time, Satan will be 100% responsible. So that's the math of interpersonal relationship. So in this formula, you have no way escaping or blaming others. So when you do evil, it's all you. When you do good, it's all you. So there's no blaming or no crediting others. And then it's just 100% you. That's unless this is the case, you are not fully 100% a person. I mean, how can that happen? I mean, when you do things, you're 100% you. There's no way that you cannot be that 100% you. Even those so-called schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, these things, you are 100% responsible for who you are. And so the relationship in interpersonal communication is 100%. So God speaks and you respond. You read the Bible and God inspires you. But it is you who's going to respond to that message. So when you do the biblical exegesis, interpretation of Bible, what you do is you are being fully involved. Not only your intellectuals, but your emotions and your will and desire to react and to follow and act out this biblical message that you are taught, the lessons that you learn. That's the effects of relationship. So thus it impacts your life. If the message you read and then the message you learned from the Bible does not impact your life, either positive or negative, it's not being interpersonal. So your interpretation exegesis is not really biblical. I told you that biblical exegesis means two or more things. First, it has to do with the Bible. So when you do the exegesis, you are taking the text of Bible, but you are also within the teaching of Bible. That's biblical exegesis. So to be the exegesis to be biblical, it has to follow the intention of the Bible. Intention of the Bible is to change your life for the better, and so you can come closer and you have that interpersonal relationship with God. And as you get to know God better every day, then you grow and you mature because you want to be more like God, Jesus Christ, and you try to follow His life, His footsteps, and you develop that desire. Not only you develop that desire, but you're going to change your behavior, your decisions, and your life goals, and your values, your worldviews. These things will change as you read and you become involved interpersonally with God. So if you do not involve interpersonally and develop that interpersonal relationship with God as you read and interpret the Bible, that biblical exegesis you are doing is just an academic exercise. I told you that we don't want that to happen. We don't want just academic or intellectual exercise. We want change our lives. And the whole thing, I mean, the Christianity, the spirituality of Christian spirituality is about changing your life. Not only toward that heaven, of course, when you're in heaven, you're going to be perfect. And you're going to behave good, according to God's desire. But until then, as you live on earth, we want you to improve and develop and mature your life. So not only you grow as a better person, but you'll influence others and serve others by growing. So whole maturity that Bible is aiming at has to do with not only just better, making you better or improving, better in of yourself. I don't know if there's a word, but making better of yourself, but serving others because you're better, because you're good, and people around you will be served by you, thus making a better world around you. That's the whole message of Bible. That's very interpersonal. It touches your heart. It touches your behavior. It touches your life. And it touches your inner issues. Whether it's a guilt, whether it's that greedy desire that's always in there. Bible touches these things and wants to change those. So it's an interpersonal communication. So do not forget, as you try to interpret the Bible, whether it's a Gospel of John or whether it's a book of Genesis, whether it's a Psalm of King David, all these writings are very intended to be interpersonal, speak to your hearts. And if your heart is responding to the message that you're reading, okay, our biblical exegesis is a success. And we want that to be our goal. So Bible is rather interpersonal. Bible is rather interpersonal. Okay. So that was a lesson 2 and or 3 of our discussion. Okay. So, biblical exegesis is contextualization. Okay, that's a very difficult word even to pronounce, but contextualization. What we are doing, what we are trying to do, the biblical exegesis, it is a kind of contextualization. This is the topic for lesson 3, and you need to understand what contextualization means. We briefly went over the context and text and try to define what those are. And now on this part, lesson 3, we will look into deeper into what this text and context is about. And see, without understanding the text and the context, the concept and how these things involved in the interpretation, you are not going to be able to do proper exegesis. Exegesis is not just the interpretation of the text and understanding of the message. To do so, to understand the message, you have to contextualize. So to understand the contextualize, you need to understand text and the context. So what is contextualization? Contextualization, it is like a time machine, and it is like a Back to the Future. And the movie Back to the Future, if you have seen it, if you haven't seen it, please do so, because you'll understand a lot about this contextualization. And in this movie, the main hero, the figure, the main character, goes back and forth in time. And the idea is you go back to your past and try to fix your future. This theme, going back to the past and trying to change the future coming, is in many movies. There's another movie that is Arnold Schwarzenegger. 그 영화 뭐지? The Terminator, right? And the Terminator movie also has the same, the framework about the time. So if it is possible, you go back to the past. If you can take the time machine and go back to the past, and then come back to the present, or go even to the future. This is basically the idea associated with the contextualization. So contextualization is basically you are trying to go back to the past, where and when the Bible is written. So So going back to the context of your biblical passage. For example, let's say you're reading trying to do the interpretation of Exodus. Exodus is the story of Moses and his people, the people of Israel coming out of Egypt after 400 years of life as diaspora meaning immigrants. So they lived as immigrants in the land of Egypt, and they never became Egyptians. They remained as Jews, worshiping their God and following their own traditions, having a region of sector in the land of Egypt. They had their own land, so to speak, small nation, and they lived with Egyptians, made a living serving Egyptians or doing farming and all those things for 400 years. But later they become slaves to Egyptian people, most Jews except Moses, who becomes the prince of Egypt, or adopted prince of the princess. So he becomes prince. But later on, God tells Moses to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt and into the land of Canaan, where they originally came from. So that's the story of Exodus. And to understand that story of Exodus, you're several thousand years later. You're not Egyptian, nor you're not a Jew. If that's the case, if you're Korean, Chinese, Japanese, or some other ethnic people, you do not know their history. You are not familiar with these things. So when that is the case, what do we need to do? You try to go back to that age, that land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, and try to become one of these people, which is not possible. I mean, even though it's not impossible, it's not so possible. So it is difficult, but you're trying to go back to the time the Bible is written. So time machine is very relevant example when you are trying to understand contextualization. You take a time machine and go back several thousand years and go back to the land of Egypt where Moses and the Jews lived, and try to understand their situation and all the atmosphere. And this is basically a contextualization. And then once you go back to the context, once that happened, then now you're trying to come back to your context. That's contextualization. So you feel everything you felt in the land of Egypt, and you live among the Jews, and from the position of Moses, and all these things, you become one of those members or heroes of the Bible. Then you try to come back to your own context. So that's contextualization, and we want to be able to do this. But before doing this contextualization, it involves the understanding of text. So the text also needs to be contextualized. This might be difficult. Again, the text needs to be contextualized. In other words, understanding of the text or a text is very the first step of contextualization. Let me explain why it is. Definition of text, we did this briefly, we did this in the last class. And in literature, it means a book or a written or printed word, regarded in the terms of its content. So text means the letters, the statements, the verses, and the sentences that are written in the book. That's basically what the text is. And today's digital word, digital term, text means this, right? Doing and sending. So that's text in today's sense. But we are not speaking about this digital term. And in philosophy, text means something that is essential, that's core, that's substantial, and something that does not change in values. So when we say text in the philosophy, it's something that is core, that is essential, that's element. And the text is there, and text usually does not change. So in the Bible, when we say the Bible as the text, it means that biblical text does not change. Even though it may translate, you do not edit, you do not change the contents of the Bible. So it becomes the text. So that biblical text, when we say biblical text, it has that semantics or connotation, saying it does not change. It is there, even though you may translate. You may translate from original language to some other languages. Still, when you do the translation, you do not change the text. You do not harm. You do not deviate or take elements out or in. So the text is there. So that's kind of text that we are talking about. So in another sense, the text is sacred. When something is sacred, you do not try to manipulate or change or deviate. So the text is sacred. So that's definition or the connotation of the text that we are going to talk about. So again, understanding text is the key to contextualization. So how do you go back to the context of the Bible? Through So you do that through the written text. So as you read the Bible is a written text. And as you read that written text, then you go back to the context that it is written. So text involves these elements here. Letters, characters, signs, and symbols. So not just the biblical text, but we're talking about, commonly speaking, the text. And when we see the text, these texts are in one of these forms: letters, characters, signs, and symbols. For example, letters. So alphabetical letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. These becomes the text. When these alphabets are properly arranged and written, and then it becomes the text for us. So any written material is text. Newspaper is a text. A storybook, that's a kind of text. So those becomes text. Okay, letters. Again, we see these Chinese letters, and that when they are arranged in a certain way, and it becomes the text. So text, it contains a meaning. It's not just letters, and letters then becomes text when it is properly arranged to convey or to contain the meanings and the message, and it becomes the text. So again, the characters. These characters are a little different than letters in sense it does have some distinguishable, but it has more than letters. Alphabets usually have the 20-some letters or characters, but these characters are more than 20. There are at least 1,000 or 2,000 characters. The symbols, these are just symbols, but it conveys the meanings. Symbols conveys the meaning. But if you go back to this Chinese characters, these characters are also, at the beginning, it was symbols. And the symbols become letters. So initially these texts starts as symbols, and then later it becomes more systematic, more characterized, and more into the certain forms, and then become letters. So basically, what is the elements of the text? These are the lines and dots, and then or shapes, or the codes. So those become the text. And so the word text can include this variety of the things. And the more important is the functions of this text. Okay? So again, the functions. What does these text do? How does text functions? What's the roles of these texts? Number one, it does records. It records your idea, your meaning, your thoughts. So you put that into the text, and it remains. When you speak, if you don't record on video, just like we do, and it will be gone, and only a few handful of people will listen to you, but your memory and their memory will fade, and it will be gone as the time passes by. So this memory and the sound is very limited. See? So the very primary, the first function of the text is to record the context. What I mean by to record the context with the text, so context includes, it is your reality, it is your existence. In other words, it is your life. So life equals basically context. So your life is not just limited to you as a person, but it involves your interaction with your surroundings. Your surroundings are so-called context. And the text is a recording of your life, someone's life, or the life of whole people, whole nation. So basically the Old Testament, much part of Old Testament is a record, the context of Jewish people, how they lived, in the context of God being involved in the nation. So that's the context. And the text, what the text does is recording of that context. So as you read the Bible, you're not only reading the text, the letter written in certain characters, but you're reading the whole context. So that's what the Bible is about. Text is writing the context that happened many, many years ago. And that context not only records the people, life of people, but how God had been involved at that time with that particular people. And the biblical exegesis, what we do is try to learn from that context what had happened many, many years ago with the Jewish people, and then bring that back to our life today, to my life, to my nation, to my church. So we live according to God's principle, God's desire, God's plan, and God's best blessing. Here the word blessing is used as a kind of design God had intended, and when initially He created each and every individual and created a nation. So that's kind of blessing that I refer to. Anyway, so the recordings, the text records, so we can go back to the context, because the memory is limited, and the verbal, the message, it just disappears, dissipates into the air unless you record it. Fortunately, we have technology to record the voice and the visuals. It's fortunate, but the Bible records that into the letters, and it becomes the text. Not only the text records, it identifies. The word identifies means simply so identification means what is and what is not. Your name, for example, it identifies who you are and who you are not. So when I call someone else's name, it excludes everyone else. See, by naming someone. So that's identification. When we say, for example, a dog, it eliminates all other kind of animals, but limit my intention to dog. And if you say a German Shepherd, amongst all the dogs, different kind of dogs, and there's a German Shepherd. That's a specific kind of dog that I'm trying to refer to and deliver the meaning to you. So in that way, I identify. So this function of identification is important. It not only says what is and what is not, but it also says who is and who is not. And basically, it says who God is and who God is not. See, that's basically the message of the text in the Bible. So it identifies who God is and who we are. See? And also it tells who we are not. It says, we are not righteous. We are not righteous. And it also says, we are all sinners. Because we live without God. That identifies us, the human being. And it identifies who Jesus Christ is. Jesus of Nazareth. The Bible says in the Gospel, He is indeed the Messiah, the Son of God. And says He is not just a ordinary human being. So, Bible, when you do the interpretation, so what do? Biblical exegesis means trying to identify what is and what is not. Who is and who is not. So is and is not is very key to understanding the text. So biblical interpretation means distinguishing between is and is not. So that's identification. What's the difference between distinguishes? Identifying the specific differences, that's distinguish. So it distinguishes A from B and B from C. It's not just is and is not. It kind of compares when identification just selects a certain thing from amongst the many. Distinguish means there are several, and it kind of shows a comparison. And the Bible, this function of distinguishing through the text is important because there are several things that are in the same lot or same basket, but they are not the same. They are different. They have each different values. So the functional text is to distinguish from A to B to C. And it tells you the differences. It tells you the diversities. So the functional text is to distinguish and differentiate one to B. Okay. Another function of the text Again, we'll continue on the functions of text. Function of text is to express. God expresses His idea, His desire, His thoughts, and His plans, and His promises through the text. God speaks. God has spoken, and He wants to record. And He used the text. But the recording, what are you recording? What is biblical writers recording? They are recording the expression of God. God has spoken, and He has expressed, and through the text, using the text, you record that something that has expressed. So without text, whether it's a voice or whether it's some visual act, that is also considered as the text. But the actual text, it does express who He is, what He wants, what the thoughts are, what the matters are. These things are expressed. Okay, we'll stop here today, and we'll continue on the next class. Thank you, and have a nice day. We'll see you next week.